Welcome everybody back to the IBJ Black Rose podcast. We got a very special guest with us today. We're very excited for this episode. So, like usual, we're going to go over the mission statement before we get into anything else. The IBJ mission, the purpose of the Institute of Black Justice is to relentlessly pursue equity and justice for all. The IBJ mission is threefold: to be an advocate for fairness and equity, to be an accelerator of the justice system's transformation, and to be an accomplice to credible social justice influencers in the communities they serve. The EPA pledge or the EPA pledge. It is a symbol for law and justice and is currently represented in the IBJ's present logo. The two interlocking chains links in the forearm of the fist or the EPA symbol. When we ask people to make an EPA pledge, we are asking them to make a pledge to advance freedom, equity, and justice. So that gets into a little bit of our logo and like how it's incorporated in what we do. The EPA pledge that we have on our website. If you look on the IBJ website, it says, "I believe in the dignity of all people and in the principles of equity and justice for all." 2, I recognize and activate myself as a powerful agent of change, capable of evolving my own attitudes and behaviors, and equally capable of influencing the attitudes and behaviors of others. 3rd, I use my voice, my pen, my position, my vote to hold public and private leaders accountable for equity and justice in their policies and procedures. And lastly, I commit a portion of my time, my talent, and my treasures to the pursuit of justice, and with no exceptions. Today we'll be talking about the Alliance for Gun Responsibility with our friend Ryan that has come on the podcast with us.
Hello, everybody that's listening and just tuned in on the website. I'm Kalia, one of the co-hosts, and yeah, I hope everybody's just having a great day. I appreciate Ryan for coming on here and just sharing his knowledge and informing everybody that does listen to the podcast. But today's overview: the Alliance for Gun Responsibility is a 501c3 organization located in Seattle, Washington. The Alliance works to save lives and eliminate the harms caused by gun violence in every community through advocacy, education, and partnerships. We have the special opportunity to sit today and hear from Ryan Guzman. I'm not sure how to say the middle name. I apologize. But Ryan Guzman, Alliance for Gun Responsibility's Community Engagement Director.
Hey,
Hi,
you did
Ryan.
great. It's Ryan Disch-Guzman. So you're good. You're very close.
Say it for me again.
Ryan Disch-Guzman.
Ryan
There you go. You got it perfect.
I got it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thanks you for coming today.
Man, okay. Thank you for the clarification on the name. We definitely want to give respect to you always. Make sure we get your name right. So I appreciate that. Because that's one thing people mess up about us too often and be okay with it. So we appreciate that.
Totally.
Introduce yourself, your role, maybe why you love the work you do.
Yeah.
What gets you up to do it. And you could even mention like how the Alliance was like formed and created and what drew you to it.
Yeah, so I'm a social worker. This is my background. I have a master's in social work from the University of Washington. And my previous work has all been in working with families, especially families experiencing trauma. And when specifically working with children. And what got me originally into this work is, the fact that the number one cause of preventable death amongst children are guns. That's the reality of our country. That's the reality of what we've been experiencing here in Washington State. And for me, that's just unacceptable. And I wanted to be involved in an organization that was directly trying to do something about it. And that's how I landed on the Alliance. The Alliance started because of a response to the Sandy Hook shooting in 2013. It's a group of concerned citizens who did not, wanted something to change. They did not want to keep the whole, just thoughts and prayers and nothing else type of mentality, and wanted to switch it to, hey, we need actual policy action here, and we need to create change. And so since then, it was, they started out with a few initiatives, voter initiatives, because originally a lot of elected officials didn't totally believe in the work we were doing, and they weren't convinced that it was popular. So we brought, votes to the people, and they said, yes, this is popular. We do want safe communities. We do want responsible gun ownership in Washington State. And that proved to elected officials that, hey, there is a majority of Washingtonians that believe and gun responsibility that believe in creating safe communities. And since then, it's been about pushing during every legislative cycle, like what we're in right now, to make sure that there are constantly there's constantly policy and there's constantly bills being put forward that make our communities safer. And so that's really kind of what is at the heart of what the Alliance does, is making sure that we have policies that are keeping people safe. But, you know, for me and myself, it's about making sure that children are safe, that children grow up in safe schools, that they do not have to worry about their, you know, that they don't have to worry about their own personal safety when they go to school. School can be a safe place for them. They can grow up to be healthy, strong adults. I want that for every child in this state. And unfortunately, you know, many kids grow up with the fear of the fear of dying from a gun death at their school, in their communities. That should not be the reality for our children here in Washington. And so that's why I'm passionate in this work, is because kids should deserve to grow up in safety and in community. And sadly enough, too many kids don't in this state. So that's why I'm passionate about doing this work.
Absolutely, I heard you. I think kids should be kids, be allowed to be kids without fear of losing their life. You know what I'm saying? Even the drills that we'll have at times, like I feel like at a lot of the times it's not even about preventative measures. It's like, how do we deal with it when it's expected to come? Where I think where your organization steps in and the work that you do comes in is disabling the root of the problem. So I think that's beautiful. And with that, I'm curious to know, like, what are some victories that you guys have had and what has made them special for you guys?
Yeah, so we've had quite a few victories over the years, but most specifically, you know, this past year, we got the assault weapons ban passed. So that was a big deal for us, and a really big fight and goal for us to get through. And so that was a big deal. And going forward, you know, right now what we're working through is legislation to really strengthen what we have now. So like a lot of, and I can kind of go through kind of what we're working on now and kind of like how we're trying to move forward. Right now we're in the legislative session, like right in the middle of it. It ends on March 7th. So it's like, you know, right now we had that success of that assault weapons ban, but there's still a lot more to go. And I think a lot of folks go, okay, well, that's it, right? Like that's the policy, that's good. It's like, no, there's so many things still that still need to be strengthened. And one of those is like, one of our bills is around reporting lost or stolen firearms. So most crimes in the state are committed with a lost or stolen firearm. And so what this does is it makes sure that if someone has a firearm, if they own that firearm and they realize it's lost or stolen, they have 24 hours to report it as stolen. So that way it's easier to track these weapons. The other one is like dealer accountability. So a lot of gun dealers, they're called FFLs in the state, they don't have they don't have a lot of restrictions around them that people might think that they do. You know, they don't have there's not a lot of requirements around cameras or having the right insurance or even storing their guns properly right now. There's a lot of loose regulations. So what this does is it makes sure that they are following through with keeping firearms safe, that they are, you know, actually being regulated properly, so that guns are kept safe that are in their care, and that they have the right security provisions. Another one is mandating that the Washington State Patrol destroy confiscated firearms. And so what a lot of people don't know is that like a lot of police departments and law enforcement departments across the country, you know, people are familiar with buyback programs, but they don't realize that not a lot of police departments are required to actually destroy the firearm so they can come back into the general market. What this does, it says the Washington State Patrol has to physically destroy those firearms and make sure that they come out of the private market, they're not there anymore, and that they are actually destroyed the way the public expects them to be destroyed. And then the last one that we're really pushing to get past this year is risk-based restrictions for sensitive places. This is making sure that community spaces are free of guns. It's a start. We wanted it to be more inclusive of a lot of spaces like parks, but those things got removed. So we're using this as a start to like a bigger conversation around risk-based restrictions in sensitive places, especially places where kids are convening, right? And like where their kids and families want to make sure that those are safe spaces. So we're using that bill as a way to to kind of expand the reach of that and make sure that we are creating really safe communities. That's kind of like an overview of what we're currently working on. And then in the future, we want to do like permit to purchase, which is something that like having a permit to purchase a gun prevents a lot of suicides. We see a reduction in suicides when that's passed. A ban on reducing bulk weapons purchases. So what that means is like right now you can buy pretty much as many weapons as you would want in Washington State. This would limit people to purchasing one firearm a month, because bulk weapons purchases, if people have a lot of weapons, they tend to lose track of them. And again, those like if you lose track of guns, they typically go into the black market that can be used for crimes. Another one is Medicaid reimbursement for hospital based violence intervention programs. This is really important because if like let's say somebody experiences gun violence, it's really important to have some trauma-informed care right there in the hospital to kind of make sure that that person has the support needed and necessary. But those programs can't get paid back for Medicaid, which means that they have to go out of pocket, which means their programs are really expensive. So this would allow them to be reimbursed by Medicaid and really grow out those programs so that people are getting support really early on when they're experiencing the trauma of gun violence. So that's kind of like an overview of what we've been working on right now. So it's kind of this mentality of, we look back and we try to celebrate the successes we had like last year and the things we've gotten past, but we're always looking forward of what still needs to happen and what's still not there. And so that's what we're pushing for right now.
Amazing. What you've been able to do and what you're fighting to do, I really love that, especially the piece about Medicaid. And I definitely would want you to talk a little bit more about that, about why it's important. Because from what I'm seeing and hearing about, I don't think many people think about that, like the people who witness or are around gun violence or, who are even in it, like having the mental health resources after the incident. But I would love to like hear your thoughts or opinions about how you guys cultivated that this was something that needed to be addressed.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So like one of the big things that we try to support is around community violence intervention. And what we know about, a lot of people talk about, when they talk about public safety, they'll jump to talking about gangs, right? And street level violence. But really what we know from research is that it really is interpersonal violence. It's one where when that community-based violence, that street level violence, when it's happening, it tends to be between two people who know each other and have some type of history. And the programs that work are ones that intervene really early in that escalation of violence and interrupt it really early with a trained, trauma-informed practitioner who can give them support in the long term. Because when people have what they need for their mental health, for when they have basic resources, when they're getting their needs met, they're far less likely to react in that way.
Absolutely, bro. Okay, first question we'll get into is what kind of community organizations do you guys partner with?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the Alliance for Gun Responsibility, what we do is we span the state of Washington, kind of working in policy and advocacy around gun violence prevention. And a big part of that work is making sure that there are community agencies and organizations at every level, both at local and at the state level, that are doing this work, because gun violence affects every single community. So if we're going to combat it, we have to go further than just things like assault weapons bans, right? Like that's what we just got passed last year, which is great. It does a lot and we think keeps people safe. But in order for these laws to actually work, you have to have really dedicated providers in community working with on the ground in neighborhoods, in communities, in schools, in hospitals, in every place that people are, in order to really interrupt violence, to really make sure that people have what they need, to make sure that folks are living in really safe and healthy communities. So that takes, a lot of dedication from a lot of really dedicated people. And what the Alliance does is works to partner with community organizations to make sure, one, that they have the funding that they need, two, that they have the support that they need, and three, that they have the policies that they need. We really need elected officials to be accountable to the people, and a big way to do that is by having really strong advocates. So the Alliance is all about building that advocacy, building community providers so that they are creating safe and healthy communities. It's a big task, but it's an important one because we want to see, we want to get to that point where we have 0 gun deaths in Washington. And that really takes every community and takes a lot of really dedicated providers. So it's about us making sure that we, hold elected officials accountable to what they say they're going to do, and then making sure that our communities have what they need to be safe, healthy communities.
For sure, I appreciate that. And I love the goal of like having no community deaths, because that should be the main goal of what we're doing here, because we are dealing with people's lives.
So that's kind of like an overview of what we've been working on right now. So it's kind of this mentality of, yeah, we look back and we try to celebrate the successes we had like last year and the things we've gotten past, but we're always looking forward of what still needs to happen and what's still not there. And so that's what we're pushing for right now.
Amazing. What you've been able to do and what you're fighting to do, I really love that, especially the piece about Medicaid. And I definitely would want you to talk a little bit more about that, about why it's important. Because from what I'm seeing and hearing about, I don't think many people think about that, like the people who witness or are around gun violence, or, who are even in it, like having the mental health resources after the incident. But I would love to like hear your thoughts or opinions about how you guys cultivated that this was something that needed to be addressed.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So like one of the big things that we try to support is around community violence intervention. And what we know about, a lot of people talk about, when they talk about public safety, they'll jump to talking about gangs, right? And street level violence. But really what we know from research is that it really is interpersonal violence. It's one where when that community-based violence, that street level violence, when it's happening, it tends to be between 2 people who know each other and have some type of history. And the programs that work are ones that intervene really early in that escalation of violence and interrupt it really early with a trained, trauma-informed practitioner who can give them support in the long term. Because when people have what they need for their mental health, for when they have basic resources, when they're getting their needs met, they're far less likely to react in that way. And another thing too is like a lot of the community violence happens with young people who are really just reaching out for support. When you live in a community where you have little power or support from others, you are going to find adverse ways to react, which sometimes leads to things like gun violence. When you live in a community where people are responsive to your needs, you have a community that fully supports you, then that's what helps to make sure that truly helps to make sure that violence is reduced. So those programs that are in hospitals and clinics, in communities that are doing that outreach work and making sure that folks have a trained professional working with them, have community resource officers that are getting them things like housing and food supports, building careers for them. These are the programs that actually build communities that reduce violence. But they struggle to make ends meet, these programs and these organizations, and they need support in funding. And so one of the ways to do that is to make sure that they can afford to keep their mental health providers on staff, and that's where Medicaid reimbursement can really come in and help. But there's other ways too that are there are other policy needs that are needed to make sure that these programs stay in place, because they're really desperately needed. And it comes with that shift of not just thinking of, like I mentioned before, it's like, so weapon bans are great, but they're not enough. Things need to happen on every level. And one of those is like really thinking about gun violence as a public health issue that needs a public health approach. And so that's why having like these Medicaid reimbursements and hospital based programs, but also just community based programs are really important and necessary.
Absolutely. I think it's because it becomes so normalized. Like I think that's a lot of what you're speaking to right now, why policy change is only one part of it. So I think about breaking down stigma within the community about like not only taking it seriously, but taking care of yourself after the event. And then also seeing it as a public problem that we all should be addressing, not just interpersonal conflicts that happen between like certain people over here, certain people over there. Because like you said, it has a bigger impact on everybody, like the safety of your children at school, the safety in your community, the safety of yourself. Um, And one very cool thing that I think I even learned today, I didn't realize so many deaths were due to like firearms that have just been found, are discarded, you know what I'm saying, and picked up. So I appreciate that. If you were to say like some of the reasons why you feel like gun violence arises in our community, if you were to list off like a couple, maybe two or three, what would those be?
Yeah, I think one, there's just so many guns. And when you allow for so many guns to be so readily available, I think that that creates a problem, especially when you don't fully educate, especially young people on the risks of guns, the risks of having a gun, owning a gun. Like we don't talk enough about that. I mean, I think one of the big things is like the number one cause of death by firearm in Washington State is suicide. Um, and we don't have a lot of supports in terms of talking through uh suicide prevention when it doesn't, when there's a gun in the home, and working with people around like what does gun safety look like? Hey, if you own, like, I understand like when people say like, hey, this is why I own a gun, almost every single time it's because it's like I want to protect myself because I don't feel safe in my community. I don't trust I don't trust that police will keep me safe. I can understand from that perspective for some folks why they feel that way. But I think also it's like when someone's making that decision, you have to weigh that with the risks of it as well. I know from data that like you're more likely to commit suicide, or a family member is more likely to commit suicide if you have a gun in the home. You're a family member or yourself are more likely to get injured by your own gun than you are to protect yourself with your own gun. That's just what the data shows us, and we know to be true. So it's like, hey, if you're like when you're making that decision and you're taking on that risk, what are you fully thinking about? Are you keeping that gun safe? Do you have a good lockbox? What is your gun storage? Like, we want folks to not only think about this, but also we want policies to make sure that gun owners are fully responsible.
Right.
That's really, really important. Like, we have to have like that knowledge for folks so that they are understanding, because just there's so many guns in communities. We have to start having folks really think seriously about why guns are existing in their communities and how to be safe around them. So that I think that's really, really important. And two, we have to make sure that people live and feel like they live in safe communities where they don't feel like they need to have a gun to keep themselves safe. People need to feel safe in their communities, and that's really important too. If people feel safe and have their needs met, in my opinion, there'd be no reason for them to even think about doing that, right? So I think those are the things that I think about with why guns are so prevalent, and the ways that we can kind of move past that. We have to create communities that have safety, and we have to create communities where people are looking at the risks, and if they are owning a gun, being fully responsible with it.
Right. I heard that, Ryan. We are down to our 5-minute mark. We will appreciate it if you were to come back and just continue, filling us with the knowledge that you do have. But I just have one last. It's a question, but it's really just trying to figure out, how does one get involved? Like, if we wanted to come and support any of the current things that you guys have going on, how would a community civilian get involved or just participate with what you guys have going on?
Yeah, so our website is gunresponsibility.org, and there's multiple ways to get involved. We have lots of groups of folks that come to Olympia to really just visually show like support for our bills and policies. We have events that happen with a bunch of community providers. So, you can subscribe to our newsletter and get that information.
Okay.
And then it's also an election year. So we're really focused on making sure that candidates get elected that are really focused on gun safety, and are really, really take this issue seriously.
Mhm.
So, I'd encourage folks to get that information from us and subscribe, but also just be curious as town halls show up, as people come knocking on your door saying, I have this candidate, ask them like, what is your candidate doing for gun safety? What are they doing to make sure that there's more mental health providers in schools? What are they doing? What are they doing to create safe communities? Do they support my local community violence intervention, or like these type of things? And some of the things I've mentioned, just ask them those simple questions. That puts pressure on them too, to really take this issue seriously, and really take community safety seriously.
Yes. Yes, sir. That was beautifully put together.
Well, thank you very much, Ryan, for coming through. Our friend Ryan really came through today and shared a lot with us. I want to say that IBJ fully supports you and all your missions and shares it with you because I feel like bringing down the violence in our community, creating more safety, and just having people live more joyful, safe lives is something that we all can support. So thank you so much, Ryan, for coming through to here. For everybody listening, please go to thegunresponsibility.org, learn more about it, get involved, and make sure to vote this year because it is a voting year. Thank you for coming. Thank you, everybody, and everybody have a blessed night.